about the evolution of endoparasitic nematodes in human hosts. I will be presenting to you the characteristics of phylum Nematoda. So they are commonly called as roundworms, and they are not segmented. They are covered with cuticle, which is excreted from the hypodermis layer, and they have bilateral symmetry and worm-like morphology. So they only have longitudinal muscles, and they move through contraction of these longitudinal muscles. So they are pseudocoelomate, which means they have no true coelom, and their pseudocoelom is formed from the cavity of the stula instead of the folding of the mesoderm layer. And their pseudocoelom is a fluid-filled cavity which forms the hydroskeleton of the nematode. And because they have only longitudinal muscles, their movement is sinusoidal. So they also cause some of human diseases that are debilitating and disfiguring. So, and they infect humans through ingestion of eggs, which are from contaminated water or food, and skin penetration by the larva, and also from bites of vector like mosquitoes and other insects. So let's now talk about the internal structures and function of the nematodes. They have simple nervous system, and their nervous system consists of a ring of nervous tissues found in the pharynx area, which forms then the dorsal nerve cord and ventral nerve cord, which run along the body of the nematode. So they have no cilia or flagella. They have specialized, some of the species of nematodes have specialized cells which excrete nitrogenous waste, and they have complete digestive system. So for the reproduction, they are dioecious, and which means the sexes are separate, and they find their mates through pheromones. So males are with special copulatory spines for stimulation or delivery of the sperm, and their sperm don't have flagella. Their sperm move by pseudopodia. For the ecosystem of nematodes, they are the most numerically abundant animals, and there are 12,000 described species, but actually there are 500,000 species, which includes the 12,000 described species and the others that aren't still described. So some are generalists and others are specialized, and some are extreme habitat specialists, and some are free-living. Mostly the free-living forms of the nematodes are of the juvenile stages. So we have nematodes have 4 juvenile stages: J1, J2, J3, and J4. It is only J3 that infects the host if the nematode is parasitic. So as mentioned, some species are parasitic. They are the common roundworms, which infect half of the human population.
So I will be discussing the taxonomy of the nematode. So there are 2 classes: class Adenopteria, or also called Phasmidia, and class Saturninthia, or the Phasmidia. Phasmids are the copulatory parts of the nematode, and they all serve as chemoreceptors. And so some of the representative species of class Adenopteria are Trichuris trichuria and Trichinella spiralis. And for class Saturninthia, it's Ascaris lumbricoides Enterobus vermicularis, and the free-living Caenorhabditis are the taxonomy of Tricheria. For the kingdom of Animalia, phylum Nematoda, class Adenophyria, order Tricherida, family Tricheridae, and genus Tricheria. So here are the symptoms and effects of being infected of Tricheria. So the notable symptoms or the effects of Tricheria is dysentery, or having wounds in the linings of the intestines, and rectal flora. Rectal flora occurs when Tricheria is become itchy in the rectum of the food, and it forces them to apply pressure and directly in the inverting the rectum. Here is the life cycle of Tricheria. So it's an oral fecal transmission. Where it starts from the environment, like the fat and the food, and it will food translate via food, and lastly over the and the environment is like ingested by little children by playing the soil where they also live because of a fecal matter.
So the next parasite that would be discussed would be Trichinella spiralis of class Adenophora under order Trichocephalida and family Trichinellidae. Trichinella spiralis would be asymptomatic, but if there's too much Trichinella spiralis inside the body, the symptoms would be nausea, vomiting, sweating, and diarrhea, which would be the cause of the excretion of the Trichinella spiralis into the lumen of the small intestine. Some other symptoms would be pneumonia, pleurisy, encephalitis, meningitis, inflammation of the heart, muscle and respiratory complications, and kidney malfunction. Life cycle would be, since Trichinella spiralis would be found in the muscles of its host, ingesting undercooked and raw meat would be one of the causes to ingest Trichinella spiralis. So if carnivores or omnivores would ingest the juvenile Trichinella spiralis, it would pass down onto the small intestine and penetrate onto the intestinal mucosa, which would molt inside the intestinal mucosa. When other animals would eat that certain host, it would also pass down to them. But when it comes to humans, eating them would cause the Trichinella spiralis juvenile to become adult, also pass down into its muscles and cause those kinds of symptoms.
So the next parasitic nematode is Ascaris lumbricoides. So it is under class Caesarnantia, order Asaridida, family Asarididae, and genus Ascaris. So it is the most known parasitic worm. It is also an intestinal roundworm, which is also considered to be the largest intestinal nematode of man. And it is the most common helminthic human infections worldwide. So for the female worms, they are larger than the males and can measure for about 40 centimeters in length and 6 millimeters in diameter. According to statistics, there are more than 1.4 billion people that are infected with Ascaris lumbricoides, representing 25% of the world population. So they are high prevalent on tropical countries where warm, wet climates provide environmental conditions that favor year-round transmission of infection. Transmission can be via ingestion of water or food, occasionally via inhalation of contaminated dust. So, when ingested by humans, the ova hatch in the small intestine and release larvae, which penetrate the intestinal wall and migrate hematogenously or via lymphatics to the heart and lungs. Occasionally, larvae may migrate to sites other than the lungs, including the kidney or brain. Larvae usually reach the lungs by 4 days after ingestion of eggs. Within the alveoli of the lungs, the larvae may mature over a period of approximately 10 days, then pass up via the bronchi and trachea, and are subsequently swallowed. Once back into the intestine, they may mature into adult worms. When the adult worms inhabit the lumen of the small intestine, they're usually in the jejunum or ileum. Their lifespan is 10 months to 2 years and then are passed into the stool. Adult worms do not multiply in the human host. So the number of adult worms per infected person relates to the degree of continued exposure to infectious eggs over time. It has been estimated that 9 times 10 to the 14th eggs contaminate the soil per day worldwide. Usually, when you are infected with Ascaris, there are no symptoms seen. However, when there are a lot of Ascaris in the person, they may show symptoms like coughing or gagging, wheezing or shortness of breath, and most severe is the Luffer's pneumonia, where pools of blood and dead epithelial cells clog the air spaces in the lungs. When they are located in the intestines, they may experience abdominal pain, weight loss. When the person is malnutrition, they may experience weight loss and growth impairment.
Okay, so the next parasitic nematode is Enterobius vermicularis. So, the kingdom is Animalia and phylum Nematoda. Class Taxonomy, order Oxyrida, family Oxyridae, and genus Enterobius. So, the life cycle of Enterobius starts by contact of the pinworm, and that is through ingestion. And the larvae hatch in small intestines, and the pinworms attach to the mucosa or the cecum, and the gravid females migrate to the colon, from the colon to the rectum. Then the females exit the anus at night to lay their eggs in the perineal area. This is due to the stimulation of the infected person, because the gravid females will pin the anus of the infected child, thus causing it to itch, and then making the eggs fall off. And then the infected person reinfects by a hand-to-mouth and contaminates household or community infected with eggs. So here are some symptoms and effects of enterobius. Frequent and strong itching of the anal area due to the pinning, and restless sleep due to itching and discomfort of anal area. Pain, rash, and other skin irritation in the anus, presence of the pinworms in the area of the child anus, and the presence of the pinworms in the sleep.
These are the characteristics of Coevolution elegans. They are mostly found in terrestrial habitats, and the species mostly favor soils with adequate moisture level, so that they can easily traverse through the soil. And they are also found in rotting vegetation. And also, they are characterized by their cylindrical bodies with tapered ends. So they can grow up to 1 millimeter, and they have transparent bodies, which makes their individual cells easily observed. There are 2 naturally occurring sexes of these C. elegans, the males and the self-fertilizing hermaphrodites. There are no naturally occurring females in the environment. So they are protandrous, which means that the hermaphrodites produce sperms before the eggs. And they are also bacteriovorous, which means they feed in a wide range of bacteria living in the soil and in the rotting vegetation. So they are model organisms. So it is important to note that they are free living. Although we are talking about the relationship between the endoparasites and the human host, in an evolutionary perspective, it is important for us to include C. elegans as it is a model organism for the elucidation of the evolutionary relationship of the endoparasitic nematodes and their human host.
Okay, so now we are going to discuss about the phylogeny of the phylum Nematoda. It wasn't mentioned earlier that the taxonomy of nematodes used was actually an older scheme of classification, the dividing of phylum Nematoda into two classes, Adenophorea or Aphasmedia and Caesarnanthea or the Aphasmedia. It was discovered that there is an overlapping characteristics when it comes to morphological and molecular characteristics. With the basis of the groupings, it was concluded that the presence or absence of phasmids has been an invalid character for deducing or separating these species. So with the incorporation of the molecular data, the phylum Nematoda was divided into 5 major clades. So the Rabitina, Tylenchina, Spirurina, Chromadoria, Enoplea, and Dorylaenia. Sorry, 6. With the incorporation of the molecular markers. However, is seen here in the class Enoplea under class Enoplida, it was observed that there is a fan-like structure in the phylogenetic tree. The adaptive radiation, the overall adaptive radiation of these groupings. So this goes to say that the molecular markers used in this phylogenetic tree are actually not that significant, or too similar or too different from each other that didn't obtain, that the phylogenetic tree within this group didn't obtain a monophyletic group unlike the other groups. With the evolution of parasitic nematodes, there has been no concrete fossil evidence when it comes to this. So there is no recent study deducing the evolutionary history of parasitic nematodes, except a fossil specimen which was dated back during the Mesozoic era. But it was hypothesized that nematodes actually proliferated earlier during the Paleozoic era. So we proposed a scheme of the parasitic nematodes with coevolution of their corresponding hosts. So as the evolution of plants and animals, we are commonly associated with the process of diversifying from the marine to the freshwater up to the terrestrial communities. So with the evolution of vertebrates and other invertebrates, so the parasites or the parasitic nematodes are their hosts, right? So this goes to say that with the evolution from the marine to the freshwater to the terrestrial environments, the nematodes have proliferated along with them. So, yes. So with the double arrow head occurring between the freshwater and the forest communities, this may have resulted with the complexity of the life cycles between parasitic nematodes, from which there is an occurrence of primary and secondary hosts. So one primary host may have been in the terrestrial, and a secondary host may have been in the freshwater communities and vice versa. Same applies between the marine communities and the terrestrial environments. Explains the origin of pathology caused by nematodes. So as mentioned earlier, the most recent fossil evidence concluded that these nematodes evolved before Mesozoic era, which is in that 250 million years ago, which has been debatable because of the lacking of this concrete fossil specimen. mostly, one parasitic stage in the life cycle may have been an ancestral trait between these group, or spending some part of their life as free-living organisms, as observed in Caenorhabditis elegans, which is unlikely a fully free-living organism. So, at their hosts, free swimmers, which are larvae, change back to their parasitic stage depending on their lifestyle. Moreover, to have evolved by free-living, facultative developing should have occurred. So it was hypothesized. So there are many hypotheses proposed by the evolution of nematodes such as this. The arrested larvae becomes associated with animals, which in turn became parasites. The formation of free-living arrested larvae of Caenorhabditis elegans, or the ancestor of Caenorhabditis elegans, may have been controlled by the environment, which has been genetically studied to involve dafraconic acid, or DA, and transforming growth factor, beta signaling, which included the metabolic processes required during parasitism. There is a proposed scheme for the evolution or the adaptation of sexual dimorphism among nematodes. So, sexual dimorphism doesn't usually necessitate differences between, or differentiation between males and females. As mentioned in the Caenorhabditis elegans sex determination, instead of a male and female relationship, it consists of an XX chromosome or a hermaphrodite and an XO chromosome as male. So it's a hermaphrodite and male pairing. So these are also exhibited by some parasitic nematodes such as Trichinella spiralis. So this suggests with Caenorhabditis elegans being a free-living nematode, this suggests that ancestral nematodes possess this sex determination as in ancestral character among nematodes. However, some nematodes exhibit XY sex determination pairing, such as Trichuris trichura. This can be associated with a more advanced character featured by nematodes. The evolution of gene content. So there is actually studied about the involvement of parasitism genes that among nematodes probably acquired for the adaptation of genes present in their free-living ancestors. So the ability to survive immunological attack from the digestive system, being an acidic environment of their hosts, has been a mystery in phylogenetic studies. So among several phyla, nematodes have been discussed with several mysteries and gaps. So this goes to show that the evolution of this group is still unresolved. So there are hypotheses actually that incorporated the parasitism genes among nematodes. So the first is the secretion of a glutathione peroxidase, or GPX1, by filarial nematodes in their glycoproteins that enable pathogenic capabilities that enable them to survive the acidic environment in the digestive systems of their hosts. So the second is actually there are genes essential for parasitism that may have evolved into novel genes via gene duplication. So a gene responsible for a resistant environment as a free-living nematode may have diversified into two duplicates. So the first duplicate remained to be free-living, and the second duplicate resulted to a nematode with a parasitic mode of lifestyle. Life cycle characteristics. The complexity of the life cycle of each nematode, these actually inhibited intra-specific competition due to different stages, changing morphology and lifestyle in each host. So there are two major forms, right? The tropozoite and the cyst forms. So these stages actually require different hosts in different lifestyle or require nutritional requirements, which enabled the inhibition of intraspecific competition. The second is the species that the life cycles of this group is species specific, which on the other hand inhibited inter-specific competition among other parasitic nematodes, as each species of parasitic nematodes actually has a distinct pathway of life cycle in their lifestyle. Thank you. So as a conclusion, the phylum of nematodes may have been still filled with gaps in terms of systematics and evolutionary history, but the beauty of how these organisms actually diversified throughout the geological timescale, although still no accurate calendar for that, will surely be interesting to discover as the essence of biology progresses. Thank you.
Restricted only to sinusoidal.
Thank you.
Restricted only to sinusoidal.
Sir Uno! Yan, gusto mo yung version 2.
So we're going to discuss about the phylum.
It's very disgusting.
These main creatures.
Parang
siyang bullseye na yun.
Cuticle.
So very going to discuss the very...
I-emphasize mo kaya Dexter ganito. Ganito mo. Hawakan mo.
Hawakan mo.
So very going to discuss the very...
Wait lang, pinakabahan ako.
Okay lang yan.
Go on, baby girl.
Pressure siya.
Ay, okay na ba yung buhok ko? Okay ba yung buhok ko?
Hindi pa.
Hindi.
Nagbabalik ako
Okay
sa
na yun.
intro.
Ay. Wait lang.
Wait lang. Lighting, please.
Lighting.
Lighting. Ay, hindi.
Phone niya, ano?
Ah, okay.
Ay,
Sige, pa-send mo na. Important yan.
Nagsisin ba yung next day very easy?
Ulit. Ulit. Ulit.
Be the cost. Wait lang. Na ako. First block sa Sorry.
Wait lang.
Go lang, go.
So very disgusting the relationship between...
We're going to talk about the evolution of parasitic nematodes.
in here. Zero repeated is considered
Wow, model.
So, as a conclusion, the phylum of nematodes may have... Ay, wait lang.
Lini, enig nag-mute kayo. May babasay ka
Sige, okay lang.
So, as a conclusion, the phylum of nematodes may have been still filled with gaps in terms of systematics and evolutionary history, but the beauty of how these organisms actually diversify throughout the geological timescale, although there's still no accurate calendar for that, will surely be interesting to discover as the essence of biology progresses. Thank you. Shamu!
Yay!
Uno.